Hey, good evening, ladies and gentle drunks. You like that one, Karen? You like that one?
Yeah, that was pretty good.
My name is Kevin Olson. I'm a recovered alcoholic. Wonderful to be here. Thank you guys for joining. And let's kick off and welcome you guys to the Fourth Dimension. Big book study, that is. And we will start tonight, as we always do, with the set-aside prayer. God, please help me to set aside everything I think I know about you, about me, about my fellow man, about the 12 steps, and please allow me to gain a fresh new vision, perspective, and understanding of what you, what me, what my fellow man, and the 12 steps are all about. Amen. And as this is the Fourth Dimension Big Book study, I always like to read the two parts of our book that refer to the fourth dimension. So first of all, on page 8, Bill Wilson writes that I was soon to be catapulted into what I like to call the fourth dimension of existence. I was to know happiness, peace, and usefulness, and a way of life that is incredibly more wonderful as time passes. And then on page 25, Bill writes, we have found much of heaven, and we have been rocketed into a fourth dimension of existence of which we had not even dreamed. We're going to be catapulted. We're going to be rocketed. And for the sake of tradition, for the sake of custom, at the Fourth Dimension Big Book study, would everyone who feels the enthusiasm, please put one hand up like this. Now everybody put another hand up like this. Attaboy, Jeff, I see you there. I see you there. Let's give it. Now we go. Oh, yeah.
Oh, yes.
Come on, Danelle. Come on, Danelle. There you go. There you go. There you go. All right. I love it, man. I love it. I'm going to have fun tonight, man. I hope you guys are ready to have fun. It's entirely optional, but hey, we are not a glum lot. We are not a glum lot. So we're going to fast forward a little bit through the forwards. We're going to be on the doctor's opinion tonight. I just want to foundationally just mention a couple things. The things that I consider to be the bedrock of this study, and really the bedrock of my life and the bedrock of my understanding of Alcoholics Anonymous. And the first is that the transition that I need to make as an alcoholic in Alcoholics Anonymous, and the transition that every alcoholic needs to make in Alcoholics Anonymous, is the transition from being a taker to being a giver. Okay, from being selfish to being selfless. Okay, from being a taker to being a giver. Okay, and if you're here tonight and you're new, you're relatively new, you might be new to this big book study. I see some new faces for sure. I'm happy to have you here. Some new faces, and you may be new to Alcoholics Anonymous. And if you're new to AA, I want you to know it's okay to be a taker for about the next 45 minutes. Okay, and then we're going to put you to work, man. We're going to put you to work. Okay, that's how it is. You know, our book says to live life on an alcoholic basis or accept spiritual help are not easy alternatives to face. And I used to come to AA and be like, somebody spiritually help me. Somebody spiritually help me. And then they would come and they'd have a wheelbarrow and a shovel and they'd be like, hey, get to work. That's your spiritual help. Okay, starting to give back in AA. And I kept thinking that people were going to do something for me. And I didn't understand that I needed to start taking action myself. You know, my grand sponsor, Clancy, talks about the invisible boat. And, you know, AA is like an invisible boat. You know, we're asking you to jump in this invisible boat. Trust us. Jump in the boat. There's a boat here. Trust us if you're new, right? And it's like, these guys are insane. What are you talking about? Get in an invisible boat. And it's only once I get in the boat and pick up the oars and start rowing that the boat will begin to appear. Okay. So we got to make that transition from being takers to givers. That's the first thing fundamentally that I want to share with you guys. And I'm in Houston, Texas right now, by the way, guys. I'm not in Calgary. So yeah, contrary to the odds, I've been allowed back into the United States of America. Apparently there's a glitch in the Department of Homeland Security's system, but no, anyway, I kid. I'm happy to be here, happy to be in the United States of America again. But just to say, that's why I'm in this hotel room. I don't have my whiteboard. So I'm going to share with you guys a couple other things real quick, and then we're going to jump into the doctor's opinion. So this we learned about last week. Okay, foundationally. At a foundational level, guys, this will inform the rest of this big book study. The next many weeks, dozens of weeks that we're going to be together, this will form the basis of everything we're going to talk about for tonight in particular, and the next 3 or 4 weeks. We are going to be talking about the problem. What Dr. Silkworth in forward to the second edition characterizes as the grave nature of alcoholism. When we get that from Dr. Silkworth, and tonight we're going to read a chapter written by a non-alcoholic doctor named Dr. Silkworth, okay, who gives us the medical estimate of the program of recovery contained in the big book. Pretty important thing, okay? And it's actually from Dr. Silkworth in this chapter, the doctor's opinion, that we get the problem, that we got an understanding of what the problem is, okay? That we're not people of just low moral character or people who have a heavy drinking problem. We have a disease, okay, called alcoholism. And it is threefold in nature: physical, mental, and spiritual. And we'll talk more about that. But what Joe and Charlie talk about, and anyone who's ever listened to a Joe and Charlie Big Book study, and if you're on this study tonight and you've never listened to a Joe and Charlie Big Book study, it's like, don't go to bed tonight until you listen to at least a little bit of a Joe and Charlie Big Book study. They are a delight, okay? They talk about the 3 things that every alcoholic of my type needs to understand in order to achieve recovery from alcoholism, okay? So again, the first thing, I need to make that transition from being a taker to being a giver. Then the next thing I need to know is what my problem is. That's the first thing. The second thing I need to know is what my solution is. And finally, I need to understand what the program of action is. Okay. And this is foundationally gonna inform the rest of this study. Everything that we're going to do tonight, in particular, in the doctor's opinion, we're going to zero in on what the problem is. And I'm going to share with you guys how I do step 1 with sponsees, how we go through it with my sponsees, okay, in particular. And we're going to use the cycle of alcoholism that Dr. Silkworth gives us in this chapter, the doctor's opinion, outlining the medical symptomology for this grave nature of alcoholism, okay? Last week, we learned about the solution, where we get the solution from. We get the solution from the great psychologist, Dr. Carl Jung. Okay, Dr. Carl Jung. We learned about Roland Hazard. Roland Hazard travels. He's got all these problems. He can't stop drinking. He goes to see Carl Jung, and he gets drunk again. And Carl Jung says, yes, Roland, sometimes men like you are helped by what I call a vital spiritual experience. And in that moment, your life and mine was saved, because we were given the solution to the disease of alcoholism. And that is simply a vital spiritual experience. Well, how do you have a vital spiritual experience? That's a good question. God is not just a light switch that I can turn on and off when I choose to. Okay? God is a lot more like Wi-Fi. Okay? And some of you have heard me talk about this idea that God is the great Wi-Fi in the sky. We all know what it's like. You know, heck, I'm here right now. I'm in my hotel room in Houston. I'm getting ready for this big book study. People are expecting me to be online, and I can't get online. I can't get the Wi-Fi to work. I had to restart my computer and go through that whole thing. Does that mean that the Wi-Fi didn't exist? No, it means that I had to change something about what I was doing, about my connection to that power. Okay? And I think that has a lot to do with Alcoholics Anonymous. We come here and we want the solution. We know we need the solution. But the paradox that most of us are at around steps 2 and 3 is that few more people are more cut off from that power than alcoholics, egomaniacs, selfish and self-centered in the extreme, self-will run riot, filled with resentment and fear and guilt and shame and dishonesty, all of that stuff, there's no room for God. There's too much me in me. And so our program is not one of adding something. Our program really, I believe, is one of subtracting things. Okay, particularly steps 4 to 9. What I'm doing is subtractive. Chuck Chamberlain called it discovering, uncovering, and discarding the things in my life that are cutting me off from this power. And that is our program of action. That's the foundation of the 12 steps. And of course, we learned last week historically, we got those from the Oxford group, started by a Lutheran minister. I said Presbyterian last week, but I had to go back and check. And he's actually a Lutheran minister named Dr. Frank Buchmann, who was a Lutheran minister who wanted to get back to what he called first century Christianity, first century Christian values, so on and so forth. Don't worry. Okay, nobody freak out. Don't log off the call. This AA is not a Christian organization. Okay. In fact, it says, Bill Wilson says he could not accept all the tenets of the Oxford group. He could not accept all the tenets, but he could accept the need for surrender, for moral inventory, for confession, for making good on the wrongs, restitution, and service. He could see that those actions were good, but he couldn't accept all the tenets of the Oxford group, which simply meant that Bill Wilson had the foresight to see that millions of drunks around the world could be saved through this work as long as we kept the door wide open at a spiritual level. Okay. And thank God he did that, man. Thank God that he gave me the dignity of having my own spiritual awakening that is now grown and evolved and is growing and evolving in ways I could never have guessed it would, but it is. And it's beautiful and it's brilliant. And someone on this call knows exactly what I'm talking about. So that's it, guys. Foundationally, problem solution, program of action. That is going to inform the rest of this study. So with that, guys, let's. I just wanted to do that little bit of a review. We are going to now get into the doctor's opinion. And Brad, you're here tonight? I see. Always very, very pleased. Always happy to see you. Are you able to read for us tonight?
I'd love to read today.
Well, we would love to have you read today. So again, before we get started in this, I want to say again, the first time I ever had a copy of the book in my hand, I was in a place called 5 North, which is the psychiatric ward of the Medicine Regional Hospital. I was in the psych ward, and I got a book. They had a big book there, and I started to read this book. When I started to read the book, what page do I start on? Well, I start on page one, right? Because I don't read prefaces and forewords and Roman numerals. That stuff's for losers. Okay. No, I start on page 1, man. And I started on page 1 and I started in Bill's story and I'm reading about Hampshire Grenadiers and I'm reading about, Hagen and all this stuff. And I had no idea what it was talking about. And fundamentally, I missed one of the most important parts in our entire book. And that is what's called the doctor's opinion. And we're going to read this now. Again, I'll say that this chapter is written by a medical doctor. Incidentally, I should have pointed this out. When we look at this, we get the problem from Dr. Silkworth, and we're gonna talk about it tonight. We get the solution from Dr. Carl Jung. We got the program of action from the Oxford group. Dr. Silkworth was not an alcoholic. Dr. Carl Jung, not an alcoholic. Oxford group, not an alcoholic. And I believe that God brought together, some non-alcoholic people, some non-alcoholic friends, and brought them together to kind of tie together this solution for us so that alcoholics like us who could not help ourselves were helped by these non-alcoholic friends to find this solution, to get connected to this power that could save our life. And thank God for that. So Dr. William D. Silkworth was a medical doctor. He was a brain surgeon. And during the Great Depression, like everyone else, he lost his job. He got fired. He didn't get fired. I think he got laid off. Like, it's not like he, failed as a brain surgeon and cut out the wrong part of somebody's brain and got fired. He got laid off during the Great Depression, like everyone did. And He'd always had I've read that he always had like a calling. He felt a calling towards alcoholics. It was something really baffling to him. And he was approached by a man named Charlie Towns, who had started a hospital in New York City, the Towns Hospital. He immediately began to work with alcoholics and at the Towns Hospital. And we're going to see a little bit of that in the doctor's opinion tonight. He would see, and what he really saw was a couple different things. He would see some people with a drinking problem come into the hospital and they would be in terrible shape. And they would say the alcoholic national anthem. They would say what we all say all the time. Okay, I'm never going to drink again. And they would take the treatment at the hospital and they would leave and he would never see them again. But some of them, about 1 out of every 10, like our co-founder, Bill Wilson, would come to the hospital in terrible shape, terrible physical and mental condition, broken, and say those magic words, I'm never going to drink again. And what would happen? He would show up back at the hospital again. Inexplicably. How could you? And in fact, in 1934, and maybe Rob can back me up on this, in 1934, Bill Wilson was in this hospital 3 different times. I think it was like April, June, and then 4 times. 4 times. When were they, Rob? What were the 4 different months?
Give me a second and I'll post it.
Okay, great. In any event, the last time was the most important time. The last time was December 11th, 1934. And I do know that for sure, because that is Bill Wilson's sobriety date. And there's a convention I go to every year in Las Vegas called the State Line Convention. That is scheduled around the same time as Bill Wilson's sober date. Somebody asked me a little while ago to speak at some events or something that they're doing. They had me scheduled for December 11th on this, and they knew that date would be very special to me. Anyway, the last time that Bill Wilson went into the hospital, December 11th, 1934, Dr. Silkworth would see guys like Bill Wilson who would come, get sober, go back out, drink again, show up again, inexplicably, 4 times in the year 1934. And Bill Wilson, Dr. Silkworth began to develop this theory about alcoholism, that alcoholics of my type, presumably the type of most of the people on this call, are different. They are not just heavy drinkers. They are what we refer to as real alcoholics. And over the next couple of weeks, we're going to talk more about this. But for now, let's get into the doctor's opinion. Let's see what Dr. Silkworth has to teach us about the disease of alcoholism, and particularly the cycle of alcoholism, which is so important and is a crucial part of how I work with sponsees. I get directly from this chapter, how I go through step 1 with them. And also we at my home group, Primary Purpose Group, we have it up on the wall. We made a motion a while ago. We have it up on the wall. So we've got the 12 steps, we've got the 12 traditions, and we have this cycle of alcoholism up on the wall. That's how important we think this is for us. So with that said, over to my main man, Brad. Thank you so much for reading for us tonight, brother.
Thanks, everybody. My name is Brad Sillitoe. I'm a recovered alcoholic. We are on the doctor's opinion on page XXV. We of Alcoholics Anonymous believe that the reader will be interested in the medical estimate of the plan of recovery described in this book. Convincing testimony must surely come from medical men who have had experience with the suffering of our members and have witnessed our return to health. A well-known doctor, chief physician at a nationally prominent hospital specializing in alcoholic and drug addiction, gave Alcoholics Anonymous this letter.
Okay, so just to point out, guys, it says he's a chief physician at a nationally prominent hospital. So that's Dr. Silkworth. And so he's not just some nobody doctor. Okay, this isn't like Dr. Nick Riviera from The Simpsons. Okay, hey, everybody. Okay, all right. This is a chief physician at a nationally prominent hospital. This is the Towns Hospital in New York City. All right. And one of the things is, why, if this is so important, why do they have it tucked away in the Roman numerals? Why isn't it page 1? Okay. Well, in the first edition of the big book, the first edition, volume 1, it was on page 1. Okay. And here's the problem with that. They wanted to ensure that everyone who would be considered an author of the big book would be an alcoholic. Okay? If you are an author of the book, you're in the numbered pages. If you are not an author of the book, but rather a contributor to the book, they put you in the Roman numerals. Okay? And so that's why the doctor's opinion was moved into the Roman numerals, because Dr. Silkworth was not an alcoholic, and they didn't want any part of the first 164 pages of the big book to be written by anyone who was non-alcoholic. Okay, they wanted the program of recovery to be written specifically just by alcoholics. That said, Dr. Silkworth is informing us about our disease, and he's been known as a great friend to Alcoholics Anonymous. Does that make sense to you guys? Why they have it in the Roman numerals? Thumbs up if that makes sense. All right, thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Brad. All right, let's keep going. And now what we're going to read, this part is now the letter, the initial letter that Dr. Silkworth wrote, and this is all that existed in the forward to the first edition big book, first edition volume 1. All that existed was the letter that we're going to read right now.
To whom it may concern, I have specialized in the treatment of alcoholism for many years. In late 1934, I attended a patient who, though he had been a competent businessman of good earning capacity, was an alcoholic of a type I had come to regard as hopeless. In the course of his third treatment...
Sorry, Brad. I just want to point out for anyone who doesn't know, that is Bill Wilson. He's talking about Bill Wilson right there. Okay, that is the competent businessman who he had come to regard as hopeless. He's talking about Bill W.
In the course of his third treatment, he acquired certain ideas concerning a possible means of recovery. As part of his rehabilitation, he commenced to present his conceptions to other alcoholics, impressing upon them that they must do likewise with still others. This has become the basis of a rapidly growing fellowship of these men and their families. This man and over 100 others appear to have recovered.
Okay, so Bill Wilson, December 11th, 1934, goes back into the town's hospital. He detoxes for 4 days. Ebby Thatcher, we talked about Ebby last week. After being with the Oxford group and learning what the program of action is, Ebby Thatcher comes to see Bill on December 16th, 1934. And in the next 2 days, they go through all of the steps as they were at that time. Bill Wilson leaves the hospital December 18th, 1934. Okay, that's when he leaves the hospital. So when Dr. Silkworth says that he had acquired certain ideas concerning a possible means of recovery, that's what he's referring to. Ebby Thatcher comes to the hospital. They don't go to 3-topic discussion meetings. They don't, go to a treatment center. They do the 12 steps, 6 steps as it was at that time, the 6 steps of the Oxford group. They do that work. They go through that action. They take those steps, and Bill Wilson comes out the other end. And when we're at the other end of the steps, what transition has Bill made? Bill has made a transition from being a taker now to being a... Hey, I can see everybody's mouths moving. Giver. Right, perfect. So now and this is, guys, I want to point out, there is nothing else for Bill to do. This is what the deal is at this point. December 18th, 1934, the only action that is left for Bill Wilson to take is to carry this message to others. That's it. There's no treatment center. There's no noon meeting for him to go to. There's no, online speaker tapes for him to go here. These are all privileges that we have today. Okay. And in a sense, it's become really easy for us to stay sober without having to actually take any of this action. And how long did I spend in AA trying to stay sober off your spiritual awakening? Trying to stay sober and sponge off the spiritual awakening that other people had had. At this time in 1934, the only thing that existed was Bill Wilson going to carry this message to other people in the hospital. Okay, and that's where we had to go to find them at that time. You go read the chapter Working with Others. One of the first directions it's going to give you is you need to find someone to work with. You can go to hospitals, institutions, jails. You find people to work with. Okay, where do we find people to work with? Where do we find newcomers to work with? I think AA meetings are really good places to find newcomers to work with. That's a great place to start. And I always say this, what's the most important part of any AA meeting? For me, the most important part of any AA meeting is at the beginning when they say, is there anyone here who's new? When those hands go up, guys, that's not for them. That's for me. So I know who the new people are that need help, because I can then have the privilege of going to carry this message to them. Are you guys with me on that? Okay. All right, let's keep going.
I personally know scores of cases who were of the type with whom other methods had failed completely. These facts appear to be of extreme medical importance because of the extraordinary possibilities of rapid growth inherent in this group. They may mark a new epoch in the annals of alcoholism. These men may well have a remedy for thousands of such situations. You may rely absolutely on anything they say about themselves. Yours very truly, William D. Silkworth, MD.
Okay, so let's define a couple words here. When it says this may mark a new epoch in the annals of alcoholism, what does that mean? An epoch just means an era, like a time, a timeline. Okay, so people have been looking for a solution to alcoholism from back when man first started crushing grapes. As long as there's been alcohol, there have been alcoholics. Okay. And we've been looking for a solution for a long time. And what Dr. Silkworth is saying here is like, these guys might have cracked code, and this might be a new era. And he was certainly right. Wasn't he? Wasn't he? Look at the transformation that we've seen over the last 90 years in Alcoholics Anonymous. Around the world, millions of sober alcoholics. Okay. It's definitely a new epoch he says the annals and annals are just like library stacks. Okay, so he's talking about in all the libraries, all the books that have been written about alcoholism, this is a new section. This is a new section of recovery going on right now. Okay, now there are a lot of lines in the big book that I use as a baseline to ask myself, how am I doing compared to these lines, compared to what's being said here? Okay, and so this is one of them. Dr. Silkworth says, you may rely absolutely on anything they say about themselves. Okay, that's a pretty nice thing to say. And I have to ask myself, if you went and talked to my doctor, Dr. Collins, who knows me, would Dr. Collins say the same thing about me? You can rely absolutely on anything Kevin says about himself. Am I that type of person? Can you rely on anything I say about myself? Am I that man? Am I that person? Am I letting God bring that into me today, that you can rely absolutely on am I a man of my word? Do I have integrity? Can you believe anything and rely on anything I say about myself? That's a good question. I like to think about that. And that's a baseline for how I'm doing compared to the first 100. Now it says, very truly yours, William D. Silkworth, MD. And as anyone, history buffs will know, it didn't originally say William D. Silkworth, MD, until the second edition of the big book. Prior to this, he didn't want to be known. It was just XX. Why? Because this is a theory that he had. Okay, he couldn't prove it. It was his opinion, and he was concerned. I'm going to be drummed out of the medical profession completely if you print my name. So don't print it. Okay. You fast forward to the second edition, 1955. Alcoholism, it had been a new era of alcoholism. Alcoholism was accepted as a disease by the American Medical Association. It had been accepted as a disease by the American Psychiatric Association. They had won the Lasker Award, many, many different things. And so Dr. Silkworth said, well, okay, now you can put my name in it, okay? Just like any of us would, okay? So that's the deal. And that's why, anyway, and again, that's why it was back in the Roman numerals, because he was not an alcoholic. He's a non-alcoholic. But that said, he may be one of the best non-alcoholic friends that Alcoholics Anonymous has ever had. Okay. So, now I want to point out in the first edition and volume 1, that's all that existed was that letter. Okay. Everything else that we're going to read now came in the second volume, of the first edition. Everything else that we're going to read now came after the fact. And it's some of the most important stuff in this entire book. Brad.
The physician who, at our request, gave us this letter has been kind enough to enlarge upon his views in another statement which follows. In this statement, he confirms what we who have suffered alcoholic torture must believe, that the body of the alcoholic is quite as abnormal as his mind. It did not satisfy us to be told that we could not control our drinking just because we were maladjusted to life, that we were in full flight from reality, or were outright mental defectives. These things were true to some extent, in fact, to a considerable extent with some of us. But we are sure that our bodies were sickened as well. In our belief, any picture of the alcoholic which leaves out this physical factor is incomplete.
So I know people love to say there's no musts in AA. There's no musts, right? There's no musts in AA. Well, we just read one. We must believe that the body of the alcoholic is just as sick as our mind. Without it, the picture of the alcoholic is incomplete if we do not factor in what we call the physical allergy, okay? We will never understand our disease if we do not understand this physical allergy to alcohol. And the first time it was explained to me and the first time I understood it, it was like discovering oxygen for the first time. It was like somebody gave me the cheat codes for the calculus test. Everything locked in when I began to understand my disease in full reality. So let's read about it. Back to you, Brad.
The doctor's theory that we have an allergy to alcohol interests us. As laymen, our opinion as to its soundness may, of course, mean little. But as ex-problem drinkers, we can say that his explanation makes good sense. It explains many things for which we cannot otherwise account. Though we work out our solution on the spiritual as well as an altruistic plane, we favor hospitalization for the alcoholic who is very jittery or befogged. More often than not, it is imperative that a man's brain be cleared before he is approached, as he has then a better chance of understanding and accepting what we have to offer.
Okay, and so what do they have to offer? What is being offered here? What is being offered is an understanding of the disease of alcoholism given to us by Dr. Silkworth after seeing thousands of drunks go in and out of the town's hospital. And when Dr. Silkworth talks about this allergy, okay, and Bill Wilson just mentioned this allergy, and Dr. Silkworth is going to expand on it. This allergy to alcohol, and at the time they didn't have anything else to call it. They didn't know what he didn't know what to call it, so he called it an allergy. Okay, this allergy to alcohol, for us, manifests itself in a phenomenon of craving. Craving for what? Salty peanuts? No. More alcohol. Once I start drinking, I have no control. Hey, Andrew Engelhart. Good to see you, buddy. How you doing? Sorry for that. I was just really happy to see my man. Physical allergy for more alcohol. Once I start drinking, I have no control over the amount that I'm going to take. Okay? Which explained why I would start drinking with no intention of getting into trouble. And I would take the drink and the drink would take me. Okay? There's a saying that for me to start drinking is like choosing to start dancing with a gorilla. It is not over. The dance is not over until the gorilla is finished with the dance. Okay? Some of you know on this call, one of my dear sponsees just drank last night. He's gone. Okay? And he tried to come back. He wanted to come back this morning. I was on the phone with him. He was ready to come back. The gorilla's not done. The gorilla is not done with him. And that's very sad. It's very sad. I'm not sad for him. I'm sad for his family. I'm sad for his mom. I'm sad for his kids. Okay? But that physical allergy, now that he's triggered it, we don't know when it's going to stop. Okay? Once I start drinking, I have no control over the amount that I take. And I can't choose when it's going to happen and when it's not. So yeah, there were times from time to time that I would start drinking and just have 6 drinks and not get in trouble. They were very few and seldom, but there were those times. Okay? Most of the time, once I started drinking, I would lose all control. Okay? And what happens is, once we start drinking, we create almost like an opiate-like craving for more alcohol. And the more that I drink, the more that I want. Okay, which explains why, at 2 o'clock in the morning when the ugly lights would come on at the bar, that's it, that's all, you were through at 2. Okay, what was I thinking about? Everyone else is getting ready to go home and they're all falling in love. I'm only got one thing that I'm thinking about, man, is how am I going to get more right now? Okay. Quick question for all the alcoholics on the call. Raise your hand if you ever bought off sales after the bar closed. There is only one category of people on planet Earth that need more booze once the bar closes. Okay. And those are people in the grips of a phenomenon of craving. Okay. Now, at 5 o'clock in the morning, guys, when all the booze is gone and everybody's passed out, but I'm still trying to keep the party going, I am the type of drinker that I will walk around and drink the bottoms of your beers. Okay. Right? You guys with me on that? Now, here's a question for you. What invariably do I get in my mouth as I tip one of those bottles back? Cigarette butt, right? If you knew the answer to that question, you're in the right meeting. You're in the right meeting. Okay? Only people in the grips of this phenomenon of craving will do that. So with that said, let's get into see what Dr. Silkworth has to say about this physical allergy to alcohol, and I'll talk a little bit more about it.
The doctor writes, the subject presented in this book seems to me to be of paramount importance to those afflicted with alcoholic addiction. I say this after many years' experience as medical director of one of the oldest hospitals in the country treating alcoholic and drug addiction. There was therefore a sense of real satisfaction when I was asked to contribute a few words on a subject which is covered in such masterly detail in these pages. We doctors have realized for a long time that some form of moral psychology was of urgent importance to alcoholics, but its application presented difficulties beyond our conception. What with our ultra-modern standards, our scientific approach to everything, we're perhaps not well equipped to apply the powers of good that lie outside our synthetic knowledge. Many years ago, one of the leading contributors to this book came under our care in this hospital, and while here, he acquired some ideas which he put into practical application at once.
Okay, guys, again, don't get overly confused. Okay, I know he writes this kind of ambiguously, but he's talking about Bill Wilson. That's who he's talking about here, okay? And one of the other things that I want to point out here, guys, is we're going to see Dr. Silkworth talk about some different things, okay? He's talking now about moral psychology, okay? He's going to talk about the powers of good that lie outside our synthetic knowledge, okay? And soon here, he's going to talk about a psychic change. We need to have this psychic change, okay? Don't be confused about what he is referring to. He is using medical and scientific terms to describe what he has seen happen to these men as a result of doing this work. But make no mistake, what has happened to those men, those first 100, is what we call a spiritual experience, okay? We are talking about the power of God and nothing else. Sometimes I hear people in AA talking about needing to have the psychic change. Like a psychic change is the same thing as a spiritual awakening. I don't think so. I don't think so. I think what Dr. Silkworth is trying to do is describe, like a scientist, in his best estimation of what he is seeing happen to these men. But if all I needed was a psychic change, I would have had one with the psychiatrist in the psych ward many years ago. It's not what we needed. It's not what I need. I don't need moral psychology. I need the power of God. Okay? And nothing else. That's what I need. Are you guys with me on that? That's what we have in AA. So don't get confused by what Dr. Silkworth is saying here. I love, there's a great saying by Jordan Peterson. He says, the evidence for the existence of a spiritual experience is irrefutable, but it is also inexplicable. So it's inexplicable for Dr. Silkworth to try and describe what he's seeing happen to these men. He just knows that it is real because he has seen men that he regarded as hopeless, like Bill Wilson, now lifted up from the scrap heap into this entirely new man, risen like Lazarus, okay? And there's only one way that happens to people like me, and that is through the power of God, not a psychic change. Okay, does that make sense to you guys? You guys with me on that? All right, good. Let's go back, Brad.
Later, he requested the privilege of being allowed to tell his story to other patients here, and with some misgiving, we consented. The cases we have followed through have been most interesting. In fact, many of them are amazing. The unselfishness of these men as we have come to know them, the entire absence of profit motive, and their community spirit is indeed inspiring to one who has labored long and wearily in this alcoholic field. They believe in themselves and still more in the power which pulls chronic alcoholics back from the gates of death. Of course,
One quick thing I want to point out in that paragraph, he says later he requested the privilege. Working with newcomers is a privilege. It's a privilege that we have. It's a privilege to be able to carry this message to other people. It's a privilege when treatment centers or hospitals or jails allow us to come in and carry this message of Alcoholics Anonymous. It's a privilege. It's not a chore. Okay? It's not a burden. It's a joy and it's a privilege to get to go do that. I get to go do that. Okay? Back to you, Brad.
of course, an alcoholic ought to be freed from his physical craving for liquor, and this often requires a definite hospital procedure before psychological measures can be of maximum benefit.
Again, we are not talking about psychological measures. This is Dr. Silkworth referring to what he has seen happen in these people. He can't describe it any other way than psychology. You guys understand? We are not a psychological solution in Alcoholics Anonymous. Make no mistake about that. Our solution is singular. It is spiritual and nothing else in AA. Okay? Which is not to say that we can't also go see a psychologist down the road. You know, page 133 talks about that. I'm not belittling a good doctor or a good psychologist. I'm just saying, don't get confused by what Dr. Silkworth is saying here and understand that psychology is somehow the answer in AA. That's not the deal. Okay? Spiritual and nothing else. All right, back to you, Brad. Thank you.
We believe, and so suggested a few years ago, that the action of alcohol on these chronic alcoholics is a manifestation of an allergy, that the phenomena of craving is limited to this class and never occurs in the average temperate drinker. These allergic types can never safely use alcohol in any form at all, and once having formed the habit and found they cannot break it, once having lost their self-confidence, their reliance upon things human, their problems pile up on them and become astonishingly difficult to solve.
You know, today, I think we all understand alcoholics can't drink alcohol ever again. We all kind of understand that. I mean, even I think basic general society understands that. This was a revolutionary paradigm shift in treatment for alcoholism. Abstinence, total abstinence. The idea that an alcoholic, a person could never drink again, could never ever learn how to drink. That had always been the deal. It's like, no, you just need to become a better person and do the stuff, and then you'll be able to have a couple drinks. It's like, no, man, I must believe that my body does not process alcohol like normal human beings. And every time I drink, I am not going to be able to tell you what happens if I take that drink. Now, he describes it as an allergy. Kind of confusing, okay? Because we all have allergies here, I'm sure. I love to, make jokes about this, but, some of you are probably allergic to something like seafood, or you're allergic to nuts, or you're allergic to, you've got hay fever, or you're allergic to cats, okay? Like, if I'm allergic to peanuts, I can't remember the last time I went and locked myself in a hotel room and ate peanuts until I lost my job, okay? But this, for some reason, is what we like to do with alcohol. It doesn't make much sense when you describe it as an allergy to me, okay? I can tell some of you like that joke. I love seeing your smiles, man. I love seeing your smiles, and when a joke lands like that, that's great. But look, here's the deal. Most of the time, guys, allergic reactions are negative. So if I'm allergic to peanuts, my throat swells up and I can't breathe. That's a negative response. If I'm allergic to cats, I get all itchy, watery eyes and itchy, and that's a negative response. If I'm allergic to milk, okay, the manifestation, my allergy to milk manifests itself in the phenomenon of getting sick to my stomach. Okay, if I'm allergic to strawberries, my allergy to strawberries manifests itself in the phenomenon of getting hives, maybe. The difference with my allergy to alcohol is that my allergic reaction to alcohol is not negative. My allergic reaction to alcohol, when I was 12 years old and discovered alcohol and had my first alcoholic allergic reaction, it was the single most positive thing that ever happened to me in my whole life. sitting in the back of that pickup truck on my way out to a farm party in Medicine Hat, Alberta, when somebody handed me a 2-liter bottle of Rockberry wine cooler, you better believe I did not find a problem. I found a solution. All right. It was like discovering oxygen. It was like I discovered emotions that I did not know were available to me in that moment. And I don't remember thinking this is negative. It was the best thing that ever happened to me, but an allergic reaction nonetheless. Okay. And that night, of course, I drank like a pig. I drank like an animal, and I stole drinks and I spilled drinks and I howled at the moon and screamed like a banshee. Okay. And I went crazy. The allergic reaction that we have as alcoholics is positive. It's not negative, but it's an allergic reaction nonetheless. Okay. And it's simply when I take alcohol into my body, I have no control over the amount that I'm going to take. My allergy to alcohol manifests itself in a phenomenon of craving for more alcohol. Okay. And there's a whole bunch of science behind it. And today we know that Dr. Silkworth was absolutely 100% right. And we know the science behind it. We know the acetaldehydes and the enzymes and all the stuff, the tetrahydroisoquinoline that is produced, and this the internal, opiate-like substance that we create in our minds. All of that is great. It's interesting. It's fine. But you don't need to know that. All I need to know is that there's never going to be a time for me as an alcoholic where I'm going to be able to learn to drink a little bit, okay? Or learn to change my circumstances somehow and be able to drink. As alcoholics, and this is what Dr. Silkworth is really trying to hammer home now for the first time, this massive shift in thinking about alcoholism, that alcoholics are unable to drink alcohol safely ever again, okay? And I needed to be able to get my arms around that, man. Okay, and I understand we work this program one day at a time, and I used to hear people say in meetings, one day at a time, maybe I drink tomorrow, but for today I don't drink. And it's like, man, you give me an option like that, sooner or later I'm going to make the wrong choice. I'm going to lose track of what day it is, and I'm going to drink again. I had to surrender to the fact that there was never, I see Benjamin nodding, right? You with me on that, man? That's the way it is, man. I had to surrender to that there was never going to be a time, never going to be a time. And I had to just get okay with that a little bit. Now, we work this spiritual program on a day-to-day basis. Of course we do. Okay. But as long as I had, our book talks about a lurking notion or some reservation that someday I'll be immune to alcohol again. As long as I had that, I'm done for. Done for. Okay. I'll be playing mental gymnastics all day long about how long it's going to take before I can get my next drink. Because that's all alcoholism wants, is just another drink, man. Just another drink. Just one more. That's all it wants. Okay. So, that's really what Dr. Silkworth is trying to get across here, is that this is a change in the way of understanding of treatment for alcoholism is entire abstinence. Okay. Brad, back to you.
Frothy emotional appeal seldom suffices. The message which can interest and hold these alcoholic people must have depth and weight. In nearly all cases, their ideals must be grounded in a power greater than themselves if they are to recreate their lives.
Oh, that's the closest that he comes to actually talking about God. He says a power greater than themselves. What is a message of depth and weight? A message of depth and weight is that God conquers alcoholism. That is a message of depth and weight. And that we of Alcoholics Anonymous have a program of action that I can do, that anyone can do, to be able to tap into that power of their own understanding to solve their problem. We have a program of action that connects us to a solution to overcome this hopeless problem. And as a result of the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, I am today a recovered alcoholic, and my obsession to drink alcohol has been expelled by the power of God. That is a message of depth and weight, not 90 meetings in 90 days or we'll refund your misery. Okay? Not meeting makers make it. Not just remember your last drunk or you're doomed to repeat it. Not just think through the drink, play the tape through to the end. Okay? All those types of little gimmicks never worked for me. And we'll talk more about over the next few weeks why that is. Those never worked for me. The only thing that ever worked for me were the actions of Alcoholics Anonymous, and those actions connecting me to a power, and that power is what gets me sober. Okay? Back to you, Brad.
If any feel that as psychiatrists directing a hospital for alcoholics, we appear somewhat sentimental, let them stand with us a while in the firing line. See the tragedies, the despairing wives, the little children. Let the solving of these problems become a part of their daily work and even of their sleeping moments. And the most cynical will not wonder that we have accepted and encouraged this movement. We feel after many years of experience that we have found nothing which has contributed more to the rehabilitation of these men than the altruistic movement now growing up among them.
Okay, guys, so this next paragraph, page XXVIII, men and women drink. This is the alcoholic cycle right here. You can write in the margin, alcoholic cycle. This is one of the most fundamental parts in our entire book, okay? And what we've done at this study and what we've done at Primary Purpose Group is really taken the cycle given to us by Dr. Silkworth, and we've really kind of visualized it, okay? And I'm going to show that to you in a moment. For now, let's just read through this paragraph, okay? And then I'm going to show you the diagram. I'm going to show you what we use. I'm going to show you how I use it with sponsees, and then we'll finish for tonight, okay? We're not going to get through the whole doctor's opinion tonight. But the first thing I want you guys to understand, he's going to say right now, men and women drink essentially because they like the effect produced by alcohol. Don't make the mistake that I made for years, thinking that this was talking about normal men and women drink, okay? You can cross out men and women. You can write alcoholics. Alcoholics drink. That's who Dr. Silkworth is talking about right now. Alcoholics like me drink because I like the effect produced by alcohol. This paragraph is talking about me. Over to you, Brad.
Men and women drink essentially because they like the effect produced by alcohol. The sensation is so elusive that while they admit it is injurious, they cannot after a time differentiate the true from the false. To them, their alcoholic life seems the only normal one. They are restless, irritable, and discontented unless they can again experience the sense of ease and comfort which comes at once by taking a few drinks which they see others taking with impunity. After they have succumbed to the desire again, as so many do, and the phenomena of craving develops, they pass through the well-known stages of the spree, emerging remorseful, with a firm resolution not to drink again. This is repeated over and over, and unless this person can experience an entire psychic change, there is very little hope of his recovery.
Oh man, I had it open. You guys probably saw it there for a second. And then sorry, stay with me. Give me 1 second. I've got it right here. Sorry, guys. I don't know why this is happening. I tried to get too fancy, I think. Sorry, give me one more moment. Apologies to anyone listening to this
I put
recording
it
on
in the
YouTube.
chat, Kevin, if that helps.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I'm going to share it here. Okay, here we go. All right, so this is how we visualize what we just read, okay? What Dr. Silkworth says is that we are restless, irritable, and discontent, okay? Until we can again experience a sense of ease and comfort, which comes at once by taking a couple drinks. Guys, am I restless, irritable, and discontent when I'm drinking, or am I restless, irritable, and discontent when I'm sober? Sober. When I'm sober, I become restless, irritable, and discontent. We call that the spiritual malady. So when we say this is a threefold illness, what we really mean is that it's physical, mental, and we're going to talk about the mental in a minute, but fundamentally fueled by this spiritual sickness, So we're restless, irritable, and discontent in sobriety, and suddenly I'll have a thought. And that thought will be, hey, I'm just going to go have a couple drinks. I'm going to have one drink. It won't be a big deal. I'm going to get away with it. It won't be a problem. I will be completely unable to distinguish the true from the false. I would be completely unable to see and remember the pain and humiliation of a week or a month ago, of all the times that I swore off. And we call that alcoholic insanity or the mental obsession. Okay? People think the mental obsession is like, oh, I obsessed about drinking all the time. That's not necessarily the case. Okay? I might go weeks and weeks and weeks not thinking about a drink at all. And suddenly, that's the most terrifying line, I think, in our entire book. Suddenly the thought that if he put some whiskey on milk on a full stomach, he'd be fine. That's how it happens. Mental obsession doesn't mean I'm thinking about drinking all the time. It means that I get a thought and I'm unable to distinguish the true from the false. Completely insane. When we talk about alcoholic insanity, we're not talking about the insane things that I do on the spree. We are talking about the insane thought that happens when I am physically sober, that I am unable to distinguish is a lie, and I believe the lie. I cannot see the truth. True things look false to me, and false things look true to me in this house of mirrors that we call alcoholism. And I take that first drink. Why? Because I'm trying to get a sense of ease and comfort. That's it. And I'll tell you what, guys, the reason I'm an alcoholic who's not drinking today is because I have discovered in Alcoholics Anonymous what I was always looking for in that drink. I have found in AA through the application of the 12 steps and the God that I have been able to access through those steps and bringing that relationship into my life, I feel today that same sense of ease and comfort, but I feel it sober, okay? In this case, though, I didn't have a solution, so I picked up a drink, I triggered that physical allergy, craving for more alcohol, and I enter the well-known stages of a spree, emerging remorseful, with a firm resolution not to drink again. We call that the alcoholic national anthem. I'm never going to drink again, okay? And what it says, this is repeated over and over. And unless this person can experience an entire psychic change, now remember, what did we learn about psychic change? What are we talking about? That's what Dr. Silkworth calls it. What do we call it? Spiritual awakening. Okay, developing a vital spiritual experience, spiritual awakening, and a relationship with God. Unless I can develop that relationship with God, there is no chance of my recovery. And I'm going to spin through this cycle over and over. And let me point out something else, guys. Every time I go through this cycle, and I go through this spree, and I hurt everyone I ever loved and destroyed anything I ever cared about again, and I emerge remorseful, what do you think happens to my spiritual sickness? Do you think it gets better every time I go through this cycle? Absolutely not. It gets worse every time. And this is why Bill Wilson describes our disease as a rapacious creditor. That's a greedy creditor that will steal everything from us. And I don't mean cash and prizes, man. I mean inside everything that makes life worthwhile. Self-worth, dignity, integrity, honor. Oh, those are easy, small prices to pay to get another drink, man. Because I got to get this sense of ease and comfort again because I cannot stand the way I feel. Okay, so with that said, guys, this is the cycle of alcoholism that is so fundamental to us at Primary Purpose Group and so fundamental to this big book study. Now, I'm going to show you guys very quickly. So just stay with me for another 5 minutes. We'll end the meeting and then we'll do a little round table and we can all say hello and introduce ourselves from where we're from, which is my favorite part. Okay. When I work with a sponsee, what I'll have them do, what I want them to do is find 5 stories from their own life that match this cycle. Because what this really is the doctor's symptomology for the disease that we have. And he is not here to diagnose us. So we have to diagnose ourselves. The way we do that is by comparing my life and the symptoms I've had in my life to this disease. So here's how that works. I want to find a time in my life. I want to look back and say, when did I swear off? Okay. Firm resolution, swearing off. I'm never going to drink again. And maybe it was just I'm going to control my drinking, or I'm not going to drink at bars anymore. I'm only going to drink at home, or maybe I'm not going to do drugs anymore, but I can still drink, or whatever the firm resolution was. Okay, when was that moment? And I'm going to give you an example from my own life in a minute. What was the period of sobriety like for me? What happened during this period of sobriety? More to the point, what wasn't happening? What steps was I not working? What sponsor was I not calling? What home group did I not have a commitment in? And then invariably, what was the thought? I want to pinpoint. I want to know. My first sponsor told me that alcoholism has a voice, and I need to know what it sounds like. And I want to be able to pinpoint what was the exact moment that I had this insane idea. And I want to point out, guys, all of this here, this is all, I'm stone cold sober when this happens. I don't have a drink, I have a thought. Suddenly the thought, okay? All action is born in thought, and I cannot take that drink without having this insane thought first. This is the real root of the problem. The main problem of the Alcoholic Center is in my mind rather than in my body, okay? I cannot stop myself from picking up that first drink. So I'll give you, and then what happens to the rest is uniform. I pick up the drink, trigger the craving, enter the spree, emerge remorseful with the firm resolution not to drink again. You know, when we talk about somebody who relapsed, I think the question to ask is not what happened. We know what happened. You had an insane thought and picked up a drink. We know what happened. That's not the question to ask. The question to ask is what wasn't happening? What was not going on? What had I placed in importance ahead of my recovery? What was more important to me than my recovery until I invariably picked up a drink again? So I'm going to give you guys an example from my own life. Let me see. I've got a bunch of them. I think I've told a lot of them already, but okay, I'll just tell the same one. So I was in, I swore off. I went to treatment. I went to a place called Lander Treatment Center, and I went for their 2-week program. And my mom, I remember, came to pick me up, and it was not a spiritual based program. It was not a 12-step based program. It was like very, a government program based on like education and, learning about the effects of alcohol and better living through volleyball and, Super Nintendo and that kind of stuff. And I did not have a spiritual awakening. And I might have eaten some good meals and gotten a little healthier. I got just good enough and healthy for a nice long relapse is what it was. Okay. And spiritually, I was as sick as ever. And I remember my mom came to pick me up, and we were driving back. And I remember we stopped at Subway, and we're driving back to from Lethbridge or Coldale or wherever it was to Medicine Hat. And my mom, and I was telling my mom, I'm like, Mom, it's all over. You never have to worry about me again. I've learned my lesson. Okay. We have a learning disability called alcoholism here, folks. All right. If you ever hear an alcoholic say, I've learned my lesson, just get out of the way. Get out of the way. Just let them go and don't lend them any money. Okay. Because I am not capable of learning my lesson. But I said this to my mom, Mom, it's all over now. Thank goodness. Like, you're never going to have to worry again. I'm never going to drink again. Thank God. I learned the treatment, Mom. I'm good to go. Can I borrow some money? And simultaneously, I'm telling her all this good news. Okay. And what thought is going on in my head? The thought in my head was, I wonder what Luke is doing tonight. Now, you may not know who Luke is, but you know exactly who Luke is, because most of us have had a Luke. Okay. Our drinking buddy, whoever it was, whatever we needed to do, the person, our toxic twin, our partner in crime, whoever it was. And I remember, I don't even think the car came to a complete stop before I, was doing a dive roll out of the car and running to Luke's house. And I remember very well getting to Luke's house, and we were just about to do what we were going to do. And he said, man, is this a good idea? Like, you still got the hospital bracelet on from like, and why don't you, Luke, just shut up and give me my medicine, man. Just let me do what I need to do. And I took that first drink, and I triggered that physical allergy, and I was gone for 4 days. And my parents had no idea where I was. My mom had no idea where I was. She just picked me up at treatment, gave me some money, and I was gone. Okay. And sure enough, I emerged remorseful, firm resolution, but my parents weren't having it anymore. And that was the day that my parents asked me to leave their house. I was no longer welcome in their house, and I had to go live another life then for a little while. So that's an example of the story. Okay. That's an example of one story. I want to know, when did you swear off? What happened during the period of sobriety? What was the insane thought? Exactly pinpoint. What was the insane thought that I had? Okay. Triggered the had the first drink, triggered the allergy, entered the well-known stages of a spree, emerging remorseful with a firm resolution not to drink. Okay. And with my sponsees, I'll ask them, I want you to come up with 5 examples from your own life that match that cycle. Okay. That's what we do. And that's how I start. That's how I qualify them into to make sure that they have alcoholism. Okay. So that's all we're going to do for tonight, guys. That's a lot. We packed a lot into that hour. So I hope,